How's it going, guys? Phil here from the Mindful Mover, and today we're going to talk about one of our planche push-up progressions, the Planche Pushup Eccentric to Leaned Forward Pushup Concentric. Man, that's a mouthful. So the planche push-up itself is one of our big 5 strength exercises, and it's easy to see why. The planche push-up gives incredible pushing strength, and it gives free gains in a lot of other movements. It gives free gains on other bent arm pushing progressions. It gives free gains in straight arm pushing progressions. It'll give free gains to your weight training strength, and the list could go on. But unless you're some sort of mutant superhuman freak, most of us can't do a planche push-up on the first try. We have to work ourselves up to it. So one of our first progressions for it is the Leaned Forward Pushup. And if you haven't checked out our video on that, be sure to, so you can learn how to progress to your first planche push-up. Now the Leaned Forward Pushup will allow you to achieve your first tuck planche, but a lot of us will still need something to go from tuck planche to our first tuck planche push-up. So in between, to bridge that gap, what we can use is a tuck planche eccentric to Leaned Forward Pushup Concentric. Again, that title's a mouthful. What this movement lets you do is build your static planche strength as well as your eccentric planche push-up strength. And it does that while also helping to build up your concentric strength so that eventually you can perform your first planche push-ups. Here's how it looks. We're going to start in the most difficult planche position that we can. So that might be tuck or advanced tuck, somewhere around there. But you're going to start by placing your hands down on the ground or an elevated surface or parallettes, whatever you're using. You're going to start by keeping your arms locked and leaning forward as far as possible. Once you're leaned forward, you're going to tuck your knees into your chest so that you're in the planche position. From there, if you're strong enough, continue leaning forward and extending your hips out until you're in the furthest leaned planche position that you can be in. That's where you're going to start and hold for a few seconds. After you've held that planche position, you're going to bend your arms, continue to lean forward, continue to extend your hips, and as you lean forward and extend the hips, eventually the deleveraging and the load should force you down towards the bottom. Resist that force and push against it as hard as you can. Now, this should be kind of like an involuntary eccentric, as we've talked about before in other videos. So gravity should be forcing you down. You should be going down towards the ground, but you should be resisting the entire time, trying to make it last as long as possible. Step 3. When you reach the bottom of the eccentric, you're going to push and try to go back up. What's going to happen though is you're going to get stuck. When you get stuck, place your feet down behind you on the ground or on some sort of elevated surface, and then as your feet are on that surface, begin to keep leaning forward and pushing up. Remember, as you're pushing up, it should be a grind the entire time. So make sure your shoulders stay as far forward of your hands as possible. And if you perform those steps, you there have your first Planche Pushup Eccentric to Leaned Forward Pushup Concentric, and I promise one day we're going to find a shorter title for that movement. Alright, let's go over some key points for this movement. Key point number 1, make sure that when you perform the top part of the movement, your arms are locked. And by locked, I mean perfectly locked in the elbows. You don't want to have almost locked. You don't want to have 99.9% locked. You want to have them completely locked. Why? That's going to allow you to make the straight arm gains. If you never lock your elbows at the top of the movement, you won't be making the straight arm static planche gains. So make sure those elbows are locked the entire time during that first initial hold. Key point number 2, make sure that you lean forward as far as possible. Remember, the way that a planche works is the lean. A lot of people try to kick their feet up into position, but it won't work that way. You have to lean forward enough to balance it. Key point number 3, no dropping during the eccentric. So what I mean by that is when you perform the eccentric part of the movement, you shouldn't start at the top and then drop to the bottom. It should take some time to reach the bottom. So make sure that that eccentric is nice and slow. Key point number 4, no rocket ship reps. So when you're performing the lean forward push-up part of the movement, make sure that it's a grind the entire time. If you can explode upward and reach the top in a second, you didn't lean forward enough. Try it again with more forward lean so that it's a long grind to the top. If you guys implement those steps, you're going to have a successful transition from your first tuck planche to your first tuck planche push-up. So give that movement a try and get up with the game train. Whoop whoop.